My wife had an affair with my parents' favorite son and got pregnant. They all expected me to raise the baby as mine, so I divorced her and cut contact until my business became worth millions and suddenly everyone needed my help. I spent most of my life being the disappointment in my family. My name is Marcus, and I'm 38 years old. For 35 years, I lived in the shadow of my younger brother Ethan, who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I was the expendable son, the one who didn't quite measure up, the one whose achievements were never enough. Then my wife had an affair with Ethan, got pregnant with his child, and my family expected me to just accept it and move on. That's when I finally walked away from all of them. I'm the oldest of 3 children. My brother Ethan is 3 years younger than me, and our sister Claire is 5 years younger. From the time Ethan was born, it was clear he was special in our parents' eyes. He was a beautiful baby, a charming toddler, and grew into a charismatic teenager who excelled at sports and academics without seeming to try hard. I was the opposite. I was awkward, introverted, and had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. When I got a B+ on a test, my parents would ask why it wasn't an A. When Ethan got a B-, they celebrated his effort and natural intelligence. When I made the junior varsity basketball team through sheer determination and practice, my parents barely attended my games. When Ethan made varsity as a freshman, they never missed a single one. The favoritism wasn't subtle. Family photos prominently displayed Ethan's achievements while mine were relegated to albums in the attic. Holiday conversations centered on Ethan's latest accomplishments while my updates were met with polite disinterest. When I got accepted to a decent state university, my parents said it was nice. When Ethan got into the same university 2 years later, they threw a massive party and called all our relatives. I graduated with a degree in computer science and got a job at a tech startup. The pay was mediocre and the hours were long, but I was building useful skills. My parents constantly compared my career trajectory to Ethan's, who had gone into sales and was immediately successful at a large pharmaceutical company. He made more money than me right out of college and drove a nicer car. My parents loved to mention how well Ethan was doing whenever I visited. I met my ex-wife Jessica at a friend's wedding when I was 26. She was beautiful, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in me. We dated for a year before getting engaged, and married 6 months later. My parents were polite about the wedding but not enthusiastic. My mother made several comments about how young we were and whether we were really ready for such a commitment. Jessica and I settled into married life in a modest 2-bedroom house about an hour from my parents' place. I was working as a software developer at a mid-sized company, making about $75,000 a year. Jessica worked as a dental hygienist making around $52,000. We were comfortable financially and talked about starting a family in a few years. The problem started about 3 years into our marriage when Ethan moved back to our area after working in another state. He had just broken up with his long-term girlfriend and wanted to be closer to family. My parents were thrilled and immediately started organizing family gatherings so Ethan wouldn't feel lonely. Jessica and Ethan seemed to hit it off right away. They had similar outgoing personalities and shared interests in fitness and outdoor activities. I was glad my wife and brother were getting along, thinking it would make family gatherings more pleasant. I had no idea what was actually developing between them. Looking back, the signs were obvious. Jessica started dressing up more for family dinners, always making sure she looked perfect when she knew Ethan would be there. She volunteered us to help Ethan move into his new apartment, then spent hours there helping him arrange furniture and decorate. She started going to the same gym as Ethan, claiming it was more convenient than her old one. My parents encouraged the friendship between Jessica and Ethan. My mother would comment on how nice it was that they got along so well, and how Ethan needed support from family during his difficult transition. My father suggested we include Ethan in our weekend plans more often since he was adjusting to being single. About 6 months after Ethan moved back, I started noticing Jessica was distant. She was less interested in spending time together, always had plans with friends or reasons to be out of the house, and our intimate life became almost non-existent. When I tried to talk to her about it, she said she was stressed from work and needed space. I also noticed she was texting constantly, always keeping her phone face down and angling it away from me when notifications came in. When I asked about it, she said it was just her friend group chat and that I was being paranoid. I tried to believe her because I didn't want to be the jealous, suspicious husband. The truth came out in the most devastating way possible. I came home from work early one day, about 8 months after Ethan had moved back. I had left my laptop at home and needed it for an afternoon meeting. I walked into my house and heard sounds coming from upstairs. My stomach dropped as I recognized what I was hearing. I walked up the stairs in a daze and pushed open our bedroom door. Jessica and Ethan were in our bed, too caught up in what they were doing to notice me immediately. When they finally saw me standing there, the looks on their faces would have been comical in any other situation. I didn't yell or freak out. I felt strangely detached, like I was watching this happen to someone else. I calmly told them both to get out of my house. Ethan tried to say something, some excuse or apology, but I cut him off. I told him he had 15 minutes to get dressed and leave before I called the police for trespassing. Jessica started crying and saying it wasn't what it looked like, which was perhaps the stupidest thing she could have said given that I had literally just walked in on them. She tried to grab my arm but I pulled away. The thought of her touching me after what I had just seen made my skin crawl. After they left, I sat in my living room trying to process what had happened. My wife had been sleeping with my brother in our bed, in the house we had bought together. The betrayal was so complete that I almost couldn't comprehend it. I called my best friend from college, David, who lived 2 hours away. He got in his car immediately and stayed with me that night. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney. I also texted my parents to let them know what had happened and that I would not be attending any family events for the foreseeable future. My mother called me back within minutes, but not with the sympathy or outrage I expected. She asked me if I was sure about what I had seen. When I confirmed that yes, I had walked in on them having sex in my bed, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said that these things happen sometimes, that marriages go through difficult phases, and that I should think carefully before making any rash decisions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her that walking in on my wife and brother having an affair was not a difficult phase, it was grounds for immediate divorce. My mother sighed and said that families needed to stick together during hard times, and that I shouldn't let my pride destroy relationships that could be repaired. I asked her if she was seriously suggesting I should forgive Jessica and Ethan and just move on from this. My mother said that forgiveness was important and that holding grudges would only hurt me in the long run. She also mentioned that Ethan was going through a hard time after his breakup and that mistakes happen when people are vulnerable. I hung up on her. The fact that my mother's first instinct was to minimize what had happened and protect Ethan rather than support me was somehow not surprising. It was exactly how my family had always operated. Ethan was the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was expected to be understanding and accommodating even when he had destroyed my marriage. Jessica tried to contact me multiple times over the next few days. She left voicemails crying and apologizing, saying she never meant to hurt me and that the affair had been a terrible mistake. She claimed she still loved me and wanted to work on our marriage. I didn't respond to any of her attempts to communicate. My lawyer advised me to keep all contact through attorneys from that point forward. 2 weeks after I discovered the affair, my parents showed up at my house unannounced. They wanted to have a serious conversation about the situation. I let them in reluctantly, curious to hear what they had to say. My father started by saying that they understood I was hurt and angry, which was natural. But he said that family was the most important thing, and that we needed to find a way to move past this incident. He kept calling it an incident, like it was a minor mishap rather than a deliberate betrayal. Then my mother dropped the real bombshell. She told me that Jessica was pregnant. She was about 6 weeks along, and while they weren't sure if the baby was mine or Ethan's, they thought it would be best for everyone if I agreed to reconcile with Jessica and raise the child as my own regardless of paternity. I sat there stunned as my mother explained her reasoning. She said that Jessica was young and had made a mistake, but that she was a good woman who deserved a second chance. She said that Ethan was not ready to be a father and that it would be unfair to burden him with a child at this stage of his life. She said that I was stable and responsible, and that I would make a good father to this child. My father added that continuing with the divorce would tear the family apart. He said that if I couldn't find it in my heart to forgive Jessica and Ethan, then I would be choosing to isolate myself from the family. He made it clear that they would be supporting Ethan and Jessica through this difficult time, and that I would be on the outside if I proceeded with the divorce. I asked them if they were seriously suggesting that I should stay married to a woman who cheated on me with my brother, and raise a child that was likely my brother's biological son or daughter. My mother said that paternity didn't matter as much as providing a stable home for the baby. She said I was being selfish by thinking about my own feelings instead of what was best for an innocent child. I told my parents to leave my house and not come back. I said that their willingness to sacrifice me to protect Ethan and maintain their perfect family image was exactly what I should have expected based on how they had treated me my entire life. My father said I was being dramatic and that I would regret cutting off my family over hurt pride. Update 1. The divorce proceedings moved forward despite my family's opposition. Jessica initially fought it, hoping we could reconcile. But when it became clear I was not changing my mind, she shifted to trying to get as much financially as possible in the settlement. She tried to claim she deserved spousal support because she had reduced her work hours to support my career, which was complete nonsense since we had both worked full-time throughout our marriage. Jessica was indeed pregnant, and the timeline made it impossible to know definitively whether the baby was mine or Ethan's without a paternity test. My lawyer insisted we do a test as soon as safely possible, since paternity would affect child support obligations. Jessica resisted initially, probably because she knew the answer wouldn't be in her favor. During this time, my parents and Claire sided completely with Jessica and Ethan. They held a baby shower for Jessica at their house, which I learned about through social media. The photo showed my entire extended family celebrating, with Ethan prominently featured holding Jessica's hand and rubbing her pregnant belly. The optics were nauseating. My parents tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. They sent emails saying I was being stubborn and that I was hurting everyone by refusing to be part of the family. Claire sent me a long message saying I was being cruel to Jessica during her pregnancy and that I needed to grow up and support my wife during this difficult time. She actually called Jessica my wife, even though we were actively divorcing. The paternity test results came back when Jessica was about 4 months pregnant. The baby was Ethan's, not mine. I felt a complex mix of relief and anger. Relief that I had no biological tie to this situation, and anger that my family had expected me to raise Ethan's child while knowing it probably wasn't mine. My lawyer used the paternity results to expedite the divorce. Since there were no children from our marriage and our assets were relatively simple to divide, we were able to finalize everything within 6 months of my filing. I got to keep the house since I could afford the mortgage on my own and Jessica moved out. We split our savings and retirement accounts roughly equally. Jessica moved in with Ethan about 2 months before the baby was born. My parents were apparently helping them financially, covering Jessica's medical expenses and buying baby furniture and supplies. They were also planning to help with childcare so Jessica could go back to work after maternity leave. The family that had barely been there for me was bending over backward to support Ethan and Jessica. The baby was born in June, a little girl they named Madison. I saw photos on social media before my parents even bothered to tell me I had a niece. Not that I considered her my niece, she was my brother's daughter with my ex-wife, and I wanted nothing to do with any of them. About a month after Madison was born, my mother called me. She said that Ethan and Jessica were struggling with the adjustment to parenthood and needed help. She asked if I would be willing to contribute financially to help them with baby expenses since I didn't have children of my own and had more disposable income than they did. I laughed out loud at the audacity. My mother seemed surprised by my reaction and said that family was supposed to help each other. I reminded her that she had made it very clear whose side she was on when she asked me to raise Ethan's child and stay married to my cheating wife. I told her I would never give Ethan or Jessica a single dollar and that she should stop calling me. I changed my phone number after that call and blocked all of my family members on social media. I sent a formal email to my parents, Ethan, Claire, and Jessica stating that I wanted no contact from any of them, that they were to consider me no longer part of the family, and that any attempts to contact me would be considered harassment. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I wasn't constantly being compared to Ethan or made to feel inadequate. I wasn't expected to be understanding and accommodating while being treated as expendable. I was on my own, but I was no longer carrying the weight of their dysfunction and favoritism. I threw myself into my work with a new intensity. Without the emotional drain of family obligations and a failing marriage, I had more energy and focus. I started taking on more challenging projects at work and pursuing additional certifications in specialized areas of software development. About a year after my divorce was finalized, I was headhunted by a startup that was developing cybersecurity software. They offered me a senior developer position with equity in the company. The salary was only slightly higher than what I was making, but the equity could be valuable if the company succeeded. I decided to take the risk. The startup was intense but exciting. I was working with brilliant people on cutting-edge technology. My contributions were recognized and valued. Within a year, I was promoted to lead developer, and 6 months after that, I became the company's chief technology officer. My equity stake increased with each promotion. 3 years after joining the startup, we were acquired by a major tech corporation for a substantial sum. My equity suddenly became worth about $4.2 million after taxes. At 36 years old, I was financially set for life if I was smart with the money. I invested most of it conservatively and used some to buy a beautiful house in a nice neighborhood across the country. I also started my own consulting business, advising other tech companies on cybersecurity infrastructure. Between the consulting income and my investments, I was making more money than I had ever imagined. I was finally successful on my own terms, without my family's opinions or comparisons to Ethan. Update 2. I had been completely no contact with my family for nearly 3 years when I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. It was from Claire, my sister, who I hadn't spoken to since before my divorce. She had created a new email account to get around my blocks. The email started with small talk about her life and how much time had passed. Then she got to the real point. She wrote that our parents were in serious financial trouble. My father had made some bad investments and their retirement savings had taken a major hit. They were struggling to pay their mortgage and were at risk of losing the house they had lived in for 30 years. Claire said that she was also having money problems. Her husband had lost his job and they were behind on bills with 3 kids to support. She wrote that she knew we had our differences, but that family was supposed to help each other in times of need. She asked if I would be willing to provide a loan to help get everyone back on their feet. I deleted the email without responding. 2 days later, I got another email from a different unknown address. This one was from my mother. She was much more direct than Claire had been. She wrote that she knew I had done very well financially and that I had a moral obligation to help my family during their crisis. She said that parents sacrifice everything for their children, and that children owe it to their parents to support them in their old age. My mother also mentioned that Ethan and Jessica were struggling. Ethan had lost his high-paying pharmaceutical sales job and was working a much lower-paying position. Jessica was working full-time but childcare for Madison was expensive. They were living paycheck to paycheck and sometimes had to ask my parents for money, which my parents couldn't really afford to give. The email ended with my mother saying that she expected me to step up and be a man, to put aside childish grudges and help my family in their time of need. She provided bank account numbers where I could transfer money. I forwarded both emails to my lawyer and asked her to send a cease and desist letter. She drafted a formal letter stating that I had requested no contact, that I would not be providing any financial assistance to anyone in my family, and that any further attempts to contact me would result in legal action for harassment. Apparently, the cease and desist letter made things worse. My mother somehow got my new phone number, probably through some online search. She called me, crying, saying that I was abandoning my family when they needed me most. She said that after everything they had done for me, raising me and providing for me, I owed them support in return. I pointed out that they had done the bare minimum required as parents, and that they had made it clear throughout my life that I was the disappointment compared to Ethan. I reminded her that when my marriage fell apart because of Ethan's affair with my wife, she had taken their side and asked me to raise Ethan's baby. I told her that I owed them absolutely nothing. My mother shifted tactics and started guilt-tripping. She said my father's health was declining from the stress of financial problems. She claimed that if they lost the house, it would probably kill him. She said I would have to live with that on my conscience if I didn't help. When guilt didn't work, she got angry and started yelling about how selfish and cold-hearted I had become. I hung up on her and blocked the number. Over the next few weeks, I received emails from various extended family members I barely knew. Apparently, my parents had been reaching out to everyone in the family, painting me as the successful son who had abandoned his struggling family. They had conveniently left out the parts about why we weren't speaking and what they had done to support Ethan's affair with my wife. Some of the family members were sympathetic to my situation once I explained what had actually happened. Others thought I should help anyway because they were my parents. I ignored all the requests and blocked the most persistent people. Then Ethan reached out. He sent me a message through LinkedIn, which I had forgotten to block him on. The message was long and rambling. He apologized for the affair and said he had been immature and selfish. He claimed he had grown up a lot since becoming a father and now understood the gravity of what he had done. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness, just for a chance to make amends. Then he got to the real point of his message. He wrote about how hard things had been financially, how much he regretted his career choices, and how difficult it was to provide for Madison. He said he had heard through the family that I was doing very well, and he wondered if I might be willing to help him get back on his feet. He suggested I could invest in a business venture he was planning, or provide a loan to help with immediate expenses. The entitlement was breathtaking. He had destroyed my marriage, my parents had taken his side, and now he wanted me to fund his life because he was struggling with the consequences of his own actions. I reported his message as spam and blocked him on LinkedIn. Jessica also tried to contact me. She sent a message through Instagram that I almost didn't see because it went to my message requests. She wrote that she knew I probably hated her, and that she understood why. She said that the past few years had been the hardest of her life, that being a single mother was incredibly difficult, and that Ethan was not the partner she had thought he would be. She wrote that she had made a terrible mistake by having the affair, that she had destroyed something good for something that turned out to be an illusion. She said she thought about me often and wondered what might have been if she hadn't been so stupid. Then she asked if I might be willing to help provide for Madison, since I was in a position to do so and Madison was an innocent child who deserved stability. I deleted the message without responding. Madison was indeed an innocent child, but she was not my responsibility. Her parents' poor choices were not my problem to solve. Update 3. The attempts to contact me continued for several months. My parents tried showing up at my old address, not realizing I had moved across the country. They sent letters to my former employer, which were forwarded to me but went straight to the trash. Claire tried to contact me through old mutual friends, asking them to pass along messages about family emergencies. I learned through an old friend who still lived in my hometown that my parents had actually held a family meeting where they discussed strategies for getting me to help financially. They had apparently considered everything from showing up at my new address uninvited to posting publicly on social media about how their successful son had abandoned them in their time of need. My old friend, someone I had known since high school, told me that when he ran into Ethan at a local store, Ethan had complained bitterly about how unfair it was that I was rich while he was struggling. Ethan apparently felt that since he had always been the golden child, he deserved to be the successful one. The fact that I had surpassed him financially was incomprehensible to him. The irony was rich. Ethan had been given every advantage, every bit of support and encouragement and financial help from our parents. He had natural charisma and opportunities handed to him. But he had coasted on those advantages without developing real discipline or character. When faced with actual adversity, he crumbled. I, on the other hand, had been forced to be self-reliant from a young age. I had learned to work hard because nothing was given to me. I had developed resilience because I had to succeed on my own merit without family support. The very things that had made my childhood difficult had prepared me for success as an adult. Eventually, the contact attempt slowed and then stopped. I assume my family finally accepted that I was not going to help them. I heard through the grapevine that my parents ended up selling their house and moving to a smaller place in a less expensive area. Ethan and Jessica broke up when Madison was about 3 years old. Jessica moved back in with her own parents, while Ethan moved into my parents' new smaller house. Claire's family struggled but eventually stabilized when her husband found new employment. She apparently told mutual friends that she regretted siding against me during the divorce, but she never actually apologized to me directly. I suspect she regretted losing access to potential financial help more than she regretted the actual betrayal. I built a good life for myself far away from all of them. I met someone wonderful named Sarah 2 years ago through my consulting work. She's a brilliant data analyst who runs her own successful firm. When I told her about my family history, she was appropriately horrified by how they had treated me and supportive of my decision to cut them off. Sarah and I got married last year in a small ceremony with close friends. No one from my biological family was invited or even informed. We're expecting our first child in a few months, a son. He'll grow up knowing he has grandparents and an aunt who exists somewhere, but who made choices that meant they couldn't be part of his life. I've thought a lot about forgiveness over the years. Some people have suggested that I should reconcile with my family now that time has passed, that holding on to anger isn't healthy. But I'm not holding on to anger. I'm holding on to boundaries. I'm protecting myself and my new family from people who demonstrated that they will always put Ethan's needs above mine, who will always expect me to be accommodating and understanding while Ethan faces no consequences for his actions. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I've processed my anger and moved on with my life. But moving on doesn't mean giving my family access to me again. They made their choices when they sided with Ethan and Jessica. They made their choices when they asked me to raise Ethan's child. They made their choices when their first instinct after years of silence was to ask for money rather than to genuinely apologize. I don't wish bad things on any of them. I hope Madison grows up happy and healthy. I hope Ethan eventually develops some maturity and character. I hope my parents enjoy whatever years they have left. I hope Claire's family thrives. But I hope all of these things from a distance, as someone who used to know them rather than as someone who is part of their lives. The truth is that my life is better without them. I'm more successful, happier, and healthier than I ever was when I was trying to earn their approval and acceptance. Sarah loves me for who I am, not in comparison to anyone else. My friends respect and value me. My professional reputation is built on my actual abilities and contributions, not on family connections or favoritism. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you need. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who only see you as useful when they need something from you, but invisible when you need their support. I spent 35 years trying to be good enough for parents who would never see me as equal to Ethan. I've spent the last 3 years building a life where I don't need their validation. To anyone dealing with similar family dynamics, I offer this perspective: you don't owe your family unlimited chances to hurt you just because you share DNA. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. And you definitely don't have to bail them out of problems they created, especially when they showed you who they really were during your darkest moments. Choose yourself. Choose the people who chose you. Build the life you deserve rather than the life they think you should have.